Okay, imagine this. You're really pushing yourself in a workout. Maybe it's a heavy lift, you're nailing some box jumps, or just sprinting hard.
Yeah.
But then there's that little worry, right, about something common, but maybe often kind of hidden.
Mhm.
We are talking about urinary leakage during physical activity. It's a real thing, especially for highly active women.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to do a deep dive into a really important new study that, well, it offers some real answers and, importantly, practical solutions.
Sounds great.
Our mission really is to unpack the insights from this pretty cutting-edge paper. It's called Pelvic Floor Muscle Training in Female Functional Fitness Exercisers, an assessor-blinded, randomized controlled trial.
Quite a title.
It is, published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine just this year, 2024. So super current. We want to pull out the key nuggets, help you understand what this actually means if you're an active woman, maybe even shift how you think about pelvic health a bit.
And just to set the stage, it's probably worth quickly defining the pelvic floor.
Good idea.
So think of it like a dynamic hammock. It's made of muscles, fascia, ligaments,
Okay.
and it's right there at the base of your core, supporting your pelvic organs. Super important.
Vital. Yeah.
Now, during high-intensity exercise, like the stuff we're talking about, there's a big increase in what we call intra-abdominal pressure.
Right. Inside your abdomen.
Exactly. And normally, the pelvic floor muscles, PFMs for short, they should counteract that pressure.
Should being the key word.
Well, sometimes they can get overloaded,
Yeah.
maybe weakened, and that can lead to pelvic floor disorders.
Oh.
The most common one, and what we're focusing on today, is stress urinary incontinence, SUI.
Which is that leakage during effort. Right. Coughing, adjusting.
Precisely. That involuntary leakage when there's physical stress.
Okay, so let's unpack that, because we're not talking about something rare here, are we?
Not at all, especially in this group.
How widespread is it for active women?
The numbers are pretty eye-opening, actually. This study mentions a recent meta-analysis. It found that 45%, almost half of female CrossFit practitioners, experience urinary incontinence.
45%. Wow.
Yeah, and they have something like a 50% increased chance of it compared to control groups.
So this really isn't just a minor thing.
No, it's a significant concern. It can genuinely limit women, stop them from fully engaging in the sports they love.
That makes sense.
And what's really fascinating here, I think, is the specific challenge with functional fitness.
How so?
Well, this kind of training often involves really high-intensity weightlifting, plus high-impact stuff like rope jumps, box jumps.
Yeah, the stuff that really generates that pressure.
Exactly. These moves are known for creating large increases in that intra-abdominal pressure.
So it puts unique demands on the pelvic floor.
Unique and intense demands, yeah. Which really highlights why this issue is so relevant for this particular group.
Okay, so if it's this common, what did we already know about, solutions, especially for women in general?
Well, for the general female population, pelvic floor muscle training, PFMT, that's actually been the standard first-line treatment for SUI for a while.
Right.
And it's backed by pretty strong evidence.
So we know it works generally.
Yeah, we know that doing PFMT regularly can cause physical changes. Things like increased muscle volume, more stiffness in the pelvic floor.
Okay.
It can even sort of lift the resting position of the bladder and rectum, which means better support.
That sounds positive, but connecting this back, it sounds like even with that general knowledge, there was a gap when it came to these really strenuous exercisers.
Exactly that. Despite knowing how common SUI is in these functional fitness athletes, the knowledge about treatments specifically, tailored for them, it was sparse.
Okay.
So this study was really designed to fill that specific gap, to provide that targeted evidence we needed.
Makes sense. So let's dive into the study itself. How did they set it up? You mentioned it was a high standard of research.
Yes, it was an assessor-blinded, randomized controlled trial.
Okay, break that down. Randomized controlled trial, that's the gold standard, right? Comparing groups.
Exactly. And assessor-blinded means the people actually measuring the results, doing the assessments, they had no idea which group the women were in.
Ah, so no bias in the results based on knowing who did the exercises.
Precisely. Keeps it objective.
Smart. And who are the participants?
They recruited 47 women. The average age was around 33 and a half.
Okay.
And the criteria were quite specific. They all had to be consistently doing CrossFit or similar functional fitness training.
Like regularly?
Yeah, at least 3 times a week and for 6 months or more. So committed exercisers.
Got it.
And crucially, every single one of them reported having SUI. That leakage, specifically during their workouts, or physical activity.
Right, the exact group we're talking about. And how are they divided up?
So they were randomly split. One group was the PFMT group, 22 women there,
Okay.
and the other was the control group with 25 women.
And the PFMT group, they got the intervention. What was it?
It was a 16-week home training program.
Oh, home training. That's interesting. Makes it very applicable.
Hugely applicable. That's a really key detail, I think. It means it's something women could potentially do themselves.
Okay, so tell us more about this home program. What did it actually look like day to day?
It was pretty straightforward but structured. They had to do 3 sets of 8 to 12 maximum pelvic floor muscle contractions.
Okay, like Kegels, but maximal effort.
Kinda, yeah. Squeezing as hard as they could and holding each squeeze for about 6 to 8 seconds.
Daily.
Yes, daily.
And how did they learn to do them right? Because that can be tricky.
Good question. They were encouraged to start in positions where they felt the contractions best, maybe lying down or sitting.
Easier positions first.
Right, and then progress towards doing them standing up as they got better control.
Okay. And were they just like given a handout and sent off?
No, not at all. They actually got weekly follow-up calls or texts from a physiotherapist.
Oh, that's great support.
Yeah, plus an information booklet and even a video showing the exercises properly.
So quite a bit of guidance.
Definitely. And the time commitment wasn't huge, only about 10 minutes a day.
10 minutes? That seems manageable. Did they stick with it?
Pretty well, actually. On average, the women completed about 70% of the sessions they were supposed to do.
70% adherence for a home program over 16 weeks. That's pretty good.
It is, yeah. It shows it was feasible.
Okay, so that's the PFMT group. What about the control group during those 16 weeks?
They just carried on with their usual functional fitness training.
Business as usual.
Exactly. And they were specifically told not to do any pelvic floor exercises during the study period.
Right, so you can clearly see the effect of the program itself.
Precisely. Isolates the variable.
Okay, drum roll then. After 16 weeks, what did they find? Let's get to the results. Did the home training actually help with the SUI symptoms?
Yes, it absolutely did. They found a significant improvement in the main outcome measure.
Which was that score?
The ICIQ UISF score. That's the one measuring frequency, amount, and, importantly, how much the leakage bothers someone.
And there was a significant difference between the groups.
Yes, the PFMT group improved significantly more than the control group on that score.
Now, I remember reading the improvement was maybe slightly below a standard benchmark.
Well, yes, technically the average improvement was just under what's called the minimal important difference, often used for the general population with SUI.
Okay, so does that mean it wasn't that meaningful?
Not necessarily. And the researchers make this point really clearly. For this specific group, active women, often starting with maybe less severe symptoms than the general SUI population, even that level of change could be really meaningful in their actual lives.
Ah, so context matters. A smaller score change might feel like a big win for someone trying to do double unders without leaking.
Exactly. It raises a really important question about how we interpret these standard benchmarks across different groups of people. What matters is the patient's experience.
Which leads perfectly to the next bit, which I found really striking. The women's own perception of how things changed.
Yes. This was huge. 64%, nearly 2/3 of the women in the PFMT group, reported that their SUI symptoms had improved.
64% compared to
only 8% in the control group.
Wow, 8%. That's a massive difference.
It really is. It shows a very real-world, clinically relevant impact. People felt better.
That's powerful. But here's the twist, right? Despite feeling better, did their actual pelvic floor muscle strength improve when measured?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
The study found no significant change in the measured pelvic floor muscle strength or endurance in the PFMT group compared to controls.
Okay, wait. So symptoms got better, people felt better, but their measured muscle strength didn't significantly increase.
Correct.
How does that work? Why did symptoms improve then?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it suggests the benefits might be coming from other physiological changes. More subtle ones.
Like
things like perhaps an elevation of the bladder neck. Or maybe a narrowing of the levator hiatus, that's the opening in the pelvic floor, where the urethra, vagina, and rectum pass through.
Okay, so structural changes almost.
Kind of. These changes can improve the overall firmness, the support system of the pelvic floor,
Right.
and potentially they might improve the automatic response of the muscles. that sort of anticipatory contraction that happens just before you cough or jump.
Ah, so it's not just about raw power, but maybe better coordination or positioning.
Exactly. It suggests success might be less about brute strength increases and more about these sort of smarter adaptive changes within the pelvic floor structure and function.
That's fascinating. It challenges the idea that improvement must come from getting significantly stronger in a measurable way.
It certainly does. It suggests maybe our traditional strength tests aren't capturing the whole picture of why PFMT helps in this context.
Hmm. So the benefits were really focused on the SEY symptoms. Did they look at other related issues, like anal incontinence or prolapse symptoms?
They did track those as well, but they found no significant differences between the PFMT group and the control group for those particular symptoms.
Okay, so the main impact here was clearly on the stress urinary incontinence.
Primarily, yes.
So stepping back, what's the bigger picture here? Why is this study so important?
Well, as we touched on, it's actually the first randomized controlled trial to specifically look at PFMT in this group functional fitness exercisers.
The first one. Really?
The first RCT, yes. So it provides really crucial, high-quality evidence where before there was, frankly, a bit of a void.
That's huge then. So what does this all mean for you listening? If you're an active woman, maybe doing CrossFit or similar training, maybe experiencing some SUI, what's the key takeaway?
The biggest takeaway is pretty clear. This 16-week home-based PFMT program can lead to real improvements in SUI symptoms for women like you.
So it works.
It works. And this is so important because it means PFMT should absolutely be recommended. It's a viable first-line treatment option that's accessible.
A home program you can actually do.
Exactly. But it also raises another question, right? How could we potentially make it even more effective?
Ah, optimization. What did this study suggest there?
Well, the researchers themselves noted that some previous studies, not necessarily in this specific group, but generally that involved supervised training.
Like with a physio guiding you.
Yes. And maybe longer programs, say 6 months instead of 16 weeks.
Mm.
Those tended to show greater improvements in the measured strength and endurance.
Okay, so while the home program is definitely effective for symptoms,
It is. Great starting point.
getting some expert guidance, maybe sticking with it longer, could potentially lead to even bigger gains, especially in that measurable strength.
That's the suggestion.
Ugh.
Seeking out a pelvic floor specialist could really help, especially maybe with making sure you're doing it perfectly right, staying motivated long term, and really maximizing those functional gains.
That makes a lot of sense. So ultimately, this deep dive, what does it tell us?
I think it really shows that having effective, accessible treatment options for SUI is empowering. It means women don't have to feel like they need to stop doing the activities they love, like functional fitness. They don't have to limit themselves because of what is ultimately a very treatable condition.
That's a fantastic message. Knowledge is power, and knowing there are solutions can keep people active and engaged.
Absolutely.
So just to recap the core finding, we've seen how a relatively simple, consistent, home-based pelvic floor muscle training program can significantly improve those bothersome SUI symptoms in highly active women.
Yes.
And interestingly, even if those improvements come from more subtle internal morphological changes, rather than just a dramatic jump in measurable muscle strength.
Precisely. Which brings us to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to consider.
Okay.
How might understanding these subtle, perhaps more intelligent ways your body adapts, looking beyond just raw muscle strength, how might that empower you to approach your own fitness and your pelvic health with a more, let's say, holistic and informed perspective?